Of all the odd, abstruse ideas rattling around my schizophrenic brain case, this is perhaps the one longest there interred. Although I say perhaps because it does have some chronological competition, unlike those which shall as of now remain unnamed, this idea hasn't remained buried for any insufficiency in its depth or any embarrassment on my part over its lagging quality. If anything, wholly the opposite is true. To put it as simply as possible, the Black Wolf is my answer to the issues more dedicated viewers have heard me raise with the Jedi, Sith, wizards, and superheroes over the last several months. His story's genesis has been the seedbed from which was also born the Project Outlander, as well as helped influence the mech tech and design and even informed aspects of the Omniverse series. Each of these components being a kernel, an ember, a spark, a token whisper of a trace of an inkling of the huge, dark master thesis waiting in the wings, whose main subject and architect has yet to be fully unveiled, until now. My apologies. A lifelong passion project like this does not restfully abode in a plastic Cliff's Notes package. Nevertheless, for the sake of those whose attentions aren't bolstered by the dogged sinews of creative enthusiasm, here goes my attempt to finally deliver a summary article on this, my literary crown jewel, my Heracles, my Sun Wukong, my King Arthur, my Zarathustra. In a word, my Superman. He has had nearly as many origins as people who've heard of him, and given that he's going on 1.2 million years spent on Earth alone, it's hardly an overstatement to call him the most storied creature in history. A few of the most antiquated sources claim that he was once human himself, abducted as an infant and reconstituted from the molecular base according to the whims and for the freak amusement of bored alien geneticists, while others claim that he was himself a product of a long-gone alien race whose evolutionary path wove a strange and, some would say, eldritch path through the tapestry of a history so far removed by space and time as to be rendered mythological. And yet still another record, this one provided by the main man himself, paints a portrait of a harrowing cosmological enterprise raised amidst interspecies war waged in strange elder eons between a machine-dependent race of utopian degenerates and the impressive, though indolent, cloves of amorphous biomateria they had bred for their company and amusement. By his own account, these once feckless spores had, over eons of happenstantial mutation and wanton tinkering by their Borgish masters, slowly grown aware of their status and learned to despise the impotent slavishness and gutless elitism of their makers, and so had staged the Shaper Rebellion. Much time and carnage later, this conflict had ravaged the Shaper's forms on all levels, burnishing and branding them, forging and reforging their bodies and tempering their minds to within a blade's edge of material perfection. The cauldron of Titanomachy had turned the once pitiful pets and servitors into a race of cold, ruthless, savage, soul-hardened demigods who now, after their wars had all been fought and won, found themselves alone and listless in an empty universe, and so derived for themselves the ongoing purpose of pluralistic exploration that has been the subject of multiple other videos on my channel for those whose curiosity has been suitably kindled. Furthermore, many titles, tales, riddles, cultures, cults, and religions have been his most tangential legacy. The consequence of this, as well as that of his immortal lifespan as a polymorph, is that the only being on Earth who truly has any concrete information on the Black Wolf is himself, and he's hardly been forthcoming with the details. And why should he be? After all, as far as he's concerned, we're little more than his pets. Sure, he can form intimate relationships with humans, and it's even technically possible for him to mate with them, though he only does so on infrequent, highly extraordinary occasions. But for much the same reason as you or I feel almost no compulsion to sit down and explain to a dog the irrationality of its behavior, does the Outlander feel little, if any, reserve in dispensing irreverent corrective measures upon our immaterial deficits. Speaking specifically of the title's reference to the folkloric English outlaw, the Outlander's preferred prey are those lordly members of the human race who would normally sit beyond the limits of normal social or legal barriers. In normal human diction, the Outlander cares nothing for human laws, and even less for our culture's moral or ethical attire. Make no mistake, he is not human and never was. He is a being of wholly alien disposition and composure, and given his backstory, he has exactly zero sympathy for devils of any rank, creed, or description. He will not show restraint or mercy to those he has found guilty of that first and most unholy of sins, the crude and careless desolation of the free and fundamental spirit of life that oils evolution's clockwork. This is why he carries a fluid crystal sword named Semper Tyrannis and a handgun inscribed with the words Et tu. And the best part of all is that, in keeping with his all-around enigmatic, ever-shifting, ever-evolving theme, the full range, extent, and even the true nature of the Black Wolf's otherworldly powers and abilities aren't fully known to anyone but himself. Again, some say it's super-advanced alien sciences, while others claim it's demons or straight-up magic. As a result, one of his favorite tricks is to pull the old, "now I'll show you my real power" trope. For example, in an early short story concept draft I wrote and then sadly lost when the thumb drive it was on went through the laundry, saw a fascistic cabal of political and corporate elites work to trap the Outlander in a space station without any of his advanced war gear and only a couple minutes' worth of oxygen. Thinking they'd seen his end, the scrupulous scumbags went about their nefarious business more or less unencumbered. That is, until the Outlander receives word through mechanisms unknown that his own plans have come to fruition, at which point he proceeds to not merely jettison himself from the station that was meant to be his coffin, but then proceed to storm and raze the headquarters of the same villains who thought they'd manipulated him to his doom all on his own. And now, rather than my simply listing more of my ultimate creation's features at you, I'm going to lead off into an excerpt from the one unfinished novel I'd once started composing but never knew how to finish. If anyone wants, an editable file will be up on the Discord, linked in the description, under the World Building tab. In any event, that's all there really is to this subject. You know the drill. Check out my books, like and subscribe if you like what I do, or just give me money if you just really love me that much. And until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and remember, life's too short to take seriously. There exists an amusing predilection among sentient minds that emerges in the way they reconstruct their past for their own future benefit. They craftily sculpt an image of tenses, past and future, that conforms to how each of their races and cultures uniquely perceives the present. In essence, sculpting the universe in their own image. That they all proclaim themselves moral and humble in their efforts to trademark reality serves only to highlight their comedic inferiority. In so doing, they hope they might better navigate toward their promised future, one they typically tell themselves they crave and rightly deserve. They remain childishly oblivious to the counterproductive nature of navigating by a fixed compass. They are weak, foolish, and stupid. They are, after all, still only animals. Laid out in these tablets is a story of a being, once born of mortals, who would go on to become so much more than what nature crudely made him that it nearly defies logic. How poorly his transformations were understood by the beasts he would have called brethren if fate had dealt him a different hand is a cruel bard song for the ages. His is a near-mythical tale, full of many terrible monsters and poetic mayhem. Songs and sonnets abound of epic battles and strange alliances, some heroic, some heretical, but none so tantalizingly bizarre as the hard-living truth. It is a foolish myth, a noble myth, for it was concocted by men who saw history through a lens made of purposely dense sheep's wool. Legends speak of him as a warrior cocooned in perpetual shadow and adamantine armor, helmed by a crown made of a slain beast's skull, and his weapon named Nightmare, with its blade allegedly forged of hellfire. His prowess in battle was rivaled by few and equaled by none. Those who would taste the bitter ice of his wrath named him for his imposing visage, while those who would live out their days in his long shadow knew him by his deadly philosophy. The midday moon, the dark prince, the long shadow of dawn, the Black Wolf. This enigmatic creature, born of earth but forged in hell, has been the subject of as many tales as there are tongues that speak his name in his long life. His felling of the benevolent king, his conversion of the ponderous knight, his slaying of the black beast, his uniting of humanity beneath his banner during the fabled War of Extinction, all of it a fantasy, all of it real, all of it invariably misread, misinterpreted, misunderstood, and corrupted. As those who would sculpt, manipulate, and distort reality to suit their own meager agendas would have passed their infernal judgments on him, likewise would he come to pass his own judgment on their world. Though they would not wish to know the real truths taught by suffering, pain, and death, they would all learn firsthand why it was that creatures so many of them viewed as gods called the Black Wolf their rightful leader. He would teach them the true tragedy of their hubris, to think themselves anything more than overdressed primates with a problematic imperative to pollute their very air with their misguided self-delusions. They would soon witness the terrible teaching sown by the soul's imperative to inflict suffering on those they deemed outsiders. They, who had forever seen the universe through their own self-inserted lens of self-serving arrogance, would know all the pain and terror of the predator-prey cycle before he was done with them. They would see life through the eyes of the Outlander. They would taste death and rebirth at his hand 1,000 times. And by each one, each life, each legacy that passed this grueling test would have their spirits permanently burn the color of their world's tenebrous cradle. And though the star and planet by whose courses the universe had first been charted were long dead and buried, their infamous legacy would live long to ferry their soulful torch through that night void and into the howling dawn. This is their legacy, the great journey, the first and final saga, the Song of Songs. It is said of a man who hears the horn of fate and does not wish to answer that he is, in this way, extremely wise. It is said of a man who hears not the call, but still hearkens to his summoner, that he is either a blind or lucky fool, depending on how clear the path is. Long, long, long ago, in a time and place most now would regard as being straight out of mythological legendarium, there was a tale written by a nameless sage that spoke of an inevitable crossroad, a story of loss and finding, of hope and twining fates. But this story was lost to the mists of time. What is said now is of a prophecy. In a time of dragons, there shall be born a man, burned by a heart, blistered by a wayward soul. On a train bound for anywhere, he will meet the one he needs. In a city of thieves, he will meet his greatest fear. In a city of merchants, he will solve the clockwork circle. His apprentice, born of ashes, will show him the one he seeks. Only a coward trusts in fate. Only a fool believes in destiny or hope. But all things die, do they not? All things progress ever onward, driven by some cosmic titan wheel. To sit upon the wheel of time and pursue its mastery is a fool's errand. Only the weak need control. Only the hopeless seek guidance. But then, when was history ever made by the wise man who sits contentedly by the fire waiting for death to come find him sleeping?